very important webinar on exports. As you know, हम बहुत webinars करते हैं deliberately ताकि हम पाकिस्तान की जो major economic themes हैं उनको study करें. आज का webinar जो है वो exports पे है, and exports, as you know, is the lifeline of Pakistan. We are struggling because unfortunately हमारी exports काफी नहीं है और हमारे खराजात सॉरी imports बहुत ज़्यादा है, and we are now in a default situation. IMF is saving us. Let's not mince words. We are in a default situation. जिस लोग कहते हैं default नहीं हुई, वो झूठ बोलते हैं. Default तो हो गई है, अब लोग हमें सिर्फ बचा रहे हैं. That's all. तो आज हमारे पास 3 इंडस्ट्री के लोग हैं जो हमें बताएंगे कि एक्सपोर्ट्स क्यों नहीं हो रही, और मैं इनसे पूछना चाहता हूँ कि क्या वजह है कि ये एक्सपोर्ट क्यों नहीं कर सकते. तो पहले हमारे पास है एहसान मलिक साहब, चेयरमैन है ये अपने पाकिस्तान बिजनेस काउंसिल के. यूनिलीवर के साथ बहुत देर काम करते रहे माशाल्लाह. वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट बिजनेस एग्जीक्यूटिव who's done a lot of work in many business areas, leading many sectors, but now he's leading the Pakistan Business Council, which is an important think tank of the business community. उनके साथ फिर उनके बाद होंगे Almas Hyder साहब. He is now the chairman of EBB and himself a businessman of very good repute, and mashallah himself is an exporter as well as developer. उसके साथ है शाहिद सत्तार साहब. शाहिद सत्तार साहब is the managing director of APTMA. APTMA is a very important business group which is responsible for exports. तो ये हमारी lineup है जी. Let me call Ehsan Malik Sahab to tell us why exports are not doing well. Ehsan Malik Sahab has done some work on it, has done some research on it. Ehsan Sahab, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ji. Let me just start by sharing my presentation. I hope you can see the presentation, Ji. First of all, I'd like to start by thanking you, Dr. Saab, and congratulating you for establishing PIDE, particularly the webinars at such a high level, and that's gauged partly by the quality of the participants, but also the quality of the presenters, with one exception, that's me. And thank you for your kind words. I'm really honored to have Almas Hyder Saab and Shahid Sattar join me in this because I absolutely don't have all the answers, and I think you'll find that most of the answers are actually held by Almas Saab and Shahid Saab. So that said, let me go straight into the presentation. It's a very long presentation, but I'm not going to spend too much time on each of the charts, but we'll have an opportunity to come back and revisit some of the material that I'm sharing. Very quickly, I want to reintroduce the Pakistan Business Council for the benefit of those that may not be familiar. Pakistan Business Council is a research-based business advocacy body. We are pan-sectoral. We are very fortunate to have 100 of the top corporates that belong to us. They are both Pakistani companies. 2/3 of them are Pakistani, but we also have 1/3 multinational companies, and they come from 14 or 15 different countries. We always take a medium to long-term view, unlike some of the other business bodies. And as I want to re-stress that we are pan-sectoral, so we are not bound to promote the interests of a particular sector, but we talk about and advocate things that are good for the country. That said, we are very proud, since today's subject is all about export, to say that if you look at the top 20 exporters this year, we find 10 of them belong to the Pakistan Business Council. If you take a cut at top 10, then the top 5 listed here are members of Pakistan Business Council. In aggregate, Pakistan Business Council members contribute about 40% of the total exports of the country. We contribute 25% to the national tax revenue. Our combined turnover, not just of the exporters, but the entire Pakistan Business Council, represents every 8th rupee of Pakistan GDP. So there's a significant footprint, economic footprint that Pakistan Business Council members occupy. We are, as I mentioned earlier, a research-based business advocacy body. This is just a sample of the studies that we've done. In the recent past, there are over 100 studies that are available free of cost on our portal, which is pbc.org.pk, and I would really recommend that those who are interested go and have a look. You'll find a plethora of information, not just on exports, but on a number of other bodies of interest. The underlying theme that drives a lot of our work is a simple statement, and I think there can't be any argument about it, and that is that solvency is the bedrock of sovereignty. When solvency is threatened, then your autonomy automatically suffers, and currently we are facing that. I don't want to go into too much detail. Dr. Saab, we've already mentioned that. The two major accounts on which we've got recurring imbalances are, of course, the external account and the fiscal account. External account, this is the 23rd IMF program. Our, import cover is constantly slipping below 3, which is generally recommended as being the safe cover to have. Currently stands at about 1.5, and that definitely is a cause of concern. On the fiscal account also, our tax to GDP ratio is consistently below 12%, and primarily that is because of poor political will. But there are other, FPR deficiencies, etc. We won't go into that because I want to quickly come back to exports. We also have circular debt problems in the power sector. We've got large unfunded pension liability. State-owned enterprises bleed our, exchequer, and of course we have a very bloated civil service, which creates a lot of pressure on the formal sector. The informal sector, of course, goes scot-free. I think when we talk of reforms, we always end up talking about business and economy, but we forget people. People are actually really the heart of Pakistan. And if you look at all these indices and indicators, unfortunately, Pakistan lags our 3 other neighbors, which is Bangladesh, India, and Sri Lanka, and by a significant margin in some cases. So whether it is health indices or life expectancy, which is a function of health, but also school attendance, malnourishment, adult literacy, human development index, we are 4th in all of them. So this is a real cause of concern, and any reform agenda really perforce must address the uplifting of people in general and the quality of life. So very recently, as recently as yesterday, we have refreshed our Charter of Economy. We now call it the Pakistan Economic Reform Program, and we've launched that. And there are very simple reasons why we think a consensus building really works. I won't go into detail, but if you look at the 4 major consensus, this war on terror, SARS, BISP, which was introduced by the People's Party, but nurtured by the PMLN, and then taken, of course, to heights by PTI, and now is globally acclaimed social net. Electricity generation capacity was enhanced by PMLN, but continued by PTI. And of course, the fallout from the COVID pandemic, which was led by the central government, but the People's Party-led Sindh government also came along. So generally recognized that Pakistan really manages COVID crisis well. There's also a consensus by default, which, for people who are not familiar, basically means this is where everybody agrees not to do anything at all. So, policy inertia then prevails. So tax, our base remains narrow. We have, energy crisis, with the result that Pakistan faces the highest energy cost in the region. State-owned enterprises, of course, continuously bleed, and that they've been bleeding us through several governments, and none of the governments have been able to do anything material on it, barring the privatization of the banks, which happened many years ago. Agriculture, no meaningful intervention has taken place to improve the productivity, and shamefully, we of course import wheat, cotton, pulses, and edible oil, and we hardly export, much fruit and vegetables. Our industry has been deindustrializing prematurely, and of course, we have a bloated bureaucracy, as I mentioned earlier. Now, let's come on to closer to the subject at hand. First of all, whenever we talk about the balance of trade or current account deficit, we end up talking about imports. But what I want to share with you is that imports, although they are high and there is scope to avoid them, most of them are unavoidable, as you can see on the right-hand chart. But also, if you look at closely on the left-hand chart, imports represent 17% of our GDP, but a country which is otherwise regarded as a very successful country from an export point of view has a very high import as a percentage of GDP, which is Vietnam at 103%. So more than the entire GDP is represented by imports there. So in my opinion, imports, whilst yes, we should do sensible import substitution, is not really the core problem of Pakistan. The core problem really, or the real issue, is exports are very low. So Pakistan's exports are only 11% of GDP. So if you recall, when we're looking at imports, we said 17% of GDP, exports are 11%. So obviously 6% of GDP is your balance of trade deficit. On Vietnam, against the 103% of GDP being imports, their exports are only 106%. So 3% is a surplus. But because the GDP is significant, that 3% represents a sizable figure, as we will see in a little while. So really, the focus really has to be enhanced on exports, which is today's theme. I was comparing it with Vietnam. So in 2001, Pakistan and Vietnam had virtually the same total trade. So that's exports and imports put together. We currently, in 2021, had a deficit of 37.5 billion. Our exports had gone up to about just under 30 billion, and we imported 66 or 67 billion. But look at where Vietnam reached. Their imports were still very high at 319 billion, but their exports were 336 billion. So they had a 17 or 18 billion surplus. But look at the number of jobs that they would have, created in this era from 2001 to over the 20 years from 2001 to 2021. So that is the kind of model that we need to really find a way of emulating. I think the other way to look at imports and export relationship is to look at the import to export ratios. So if you look at the blue charts here, which I'm trying to highlight, there are very few years where our imports have exceeded or have represented more than 50% of our exports. But Vietnam, which is the yellow chart, in most of the years, their exports have exceeded their imports. I mean, 2021, they were just below. Bangladesh does better than us. They're in the 60s. India does even better. They're in the 70s and 80s. So this is before you take remittances into account. This is just purely the relationship between exports and imports. So the higher cover that you have, the better you have a chance of minimizing your balance of trade deficit, or even creating a balance of trade surplus. If you add remittances to Pakistan's exports and import cover, in other words, you add it to your exports, then there are a few years where you get up to 1. So 100% is covered. In 2022, because of the commodity cycle not playing to our advantage, we were well below. If you adjusted for the impact of the commodity inflation, etc., we were approaching 1. So there is a bit of hope there. But really, it is not remittances. The remittances remain important, but it is export that we must be driving. So Pakistan Business Council, consciously adopted a Make in Pakistan thrust a few years ago, and that has 3 pillars. One, the first pillar, very important pillar, is grow more and grow better. That's all about agriculture. Make more and make better, that is about manufacturing. And serve more and serve better, that is about creating or producing the kind of services that have an international market, but also help our agriculture and our goods to move at an optimal cost, into the ports and then well beyond that. So these are, logistics, for example. Why Make in Pakistan? Obviously goes without saying that job creation has to be important. There are 2 million people that become into employable age every year. We need to export more, but not commodities. We need to export value-added goods, which means we have to manufacture. And then, of course, import substitution is important, but on a sensible basis. Pakistan Business Council has never supported, eyes shut type of protection. All protection, etc., where it is justified, should be given for a limited period of time and should have clear objectives. But none of our Make in Pakistan thrust can work if you do not have supportive policies that create a level playing field between the formal sector and the informal sector. Okay, so first of all, why grow more? I don't think I need to go into too much detail. If you compare each of our 5 major crops and you look at the per hectare or per acre output, Pakistan lags behind the global best. So wheat, for example, we are 28% of the global west, which is New Zealand. Cotton, we are 19% of the global west, which was China, and so on. And then, of course, cotton, which provides a very useful component of our textiles, the bedrock of our textile exports. Again, whilst India's cotton exports have grown significantly over the last few years, ours has declined by almost the same rate as the Indian exports have, Indian growth, Indian cotton has grown by. Of course, we should also grow more because then we can import less or avoid imports. We imported vegetable oil of 2.2 billion, and if I add all the the cotton and the pulses and the fruits and cereals, which is wheat basically, and sugar, that amounted to 5.6 billion in 2020. Now that is 5.6 billion is a very sizable impact on your balance of trade and current account. Why make more? Okay, so the country's GDP growth and our manufacturing growth is a very close relationship, as the left-hand chart will show. In the years when we do well on manufacturing, we also our GDP growth does better, and vice versa. When we do badly, as we did in 2020, our GDP growth, of course, also becomes negative. Pakistan also sadly has been deindustrializing prematurely. I know that most countries, when they develop, there comes a point where industry starts taking a back seat, and then services outgrow. Of course, that has happened in the case of Pakistan also. But we need to create jobs, and while services can create a lot of jobs, a lot of these services are destined for domestic market. They are not yet destined for export market. Yes, they should be, but they are not currently. So we need to continue to rely on manufacturing to create that employment opportunity. So if you look at the green part, the green part is Pakistan. If you look at the orange or the reddish part, that's Bangladesh. So Bangladesh has been industrializing whilst we've been deindustrializing. Okay, also we want, if you don't make, you can't export, goes without saying. So our ratio, our share of world exports has been declining, whilst in the last decade and a half, Bangladesh's share has gone up by a multiple of 2.2, and of course Vietnam's has gone up 7-fold. So Vietnam really ideally has to be our model there again. We also can make a lot of our goods for a domestic market because we're fortunate to have a large domestic market, and that gives us scale. So if you take Pakistan's total population of 220 million, and you shave off the bottom of the pyramid, that's still 173 million population, which is about twice the size of Turkey, for example. So we have that opportunity, we have that scale, we can create competitiveness, provided all the other policies come along nicely. And on the right-hand chart, we've got things like textiles and footwear and water pumps, which are basic engineered products and tools and cutlery, etc., which we should not be importing, and these are the import figures for 2020. Okay, surfboard. So there, obviously, we compare with a country which is not a million miles away, which is India. Similar culture, better education, better organization, proper services. So India's exports. And this is just IT in 2020 was 65 billion, ours was only 1.3 billion. So they, out-exported us by 48 times. Okay, India is a larger country, so you should adjust it by some norm, and maybe GDP might be one way to do it. So India's IT exports represented 2.5% of the GDP, ours was only 0.5. So it doesn't bear any comparison at all. So there's a huge potential to export more. Now, one of the reasons why we don't do well in exports is that we don't play with where money is. The significant amount of money in world exports, and of the total world export of 17.7 trillion, 12.2 trillion is accounted for by things like electrical machinery, mechanical machinery, of course, fuel oil, motor vehicles, pharmaceutical products, chemicals, and plastics. Yeah. So of the total world trade of 17.7 trillion, 12.2 trillion is represented by these large items, and that is 71% of the total world trade. Our representation of our 22.2 billion was only 1.98. So that's 9%. I spent about 25 years in the consumer product domain, and the simple thing that we always followed was you follow the money. You go where the money is, right? So here we are not going where the real money is. The real money is in these things, which is machinery, motor vehicles, chemicals, plastics, pharma products. Okay. The other sad fact, and again we have to compare it with Vietnam, which ought to be really our model, is to look at how our split of exports has transformed over the years. So we started this chart is taking us from 1995 to 2019, and if you look at the left hand side, which is Pakistan, from about 73% reliance on textiles and agriculture products, it went down to 69%. There's not a significant change, yeah. But look at Vietnam, where they really, their major growth or their major representation came in electronics, which is this 37% here, into machinery, which is 8%. Motor vehicles is relatively small, but at least they are there. They are also there in chemicals, which is the orange part. So, from basic products, they've gone into value-added products, and that's again, how you boost your total exports. Vietnam's other advantage, and to some degree, Bangladesh's advantage also, is that they have very helpful trade agreements that they are members of. They are part of ASEAN. They have trade agreements with the European Union, now with Europe after Brexit. They have agreements with China, with Korea, with China, I mentioned, with Japan. They are now members of RCEP, which is the regional trade agreement, CPTPP, which is the Pacific agreement. So they've got all continents covered, barring maybe Africa and Latin America. So they've really done their homework. Bangladesh, of course, continues still to enjoy the LDC status, but and of course they have similar access to us in the EU. We have GSP plus. They have something called everything but arms, which is broadly speaking similar. But then let's come back to Pakistan. So Pakistan has one major trade agreement, which is with China, which now gives us 45% duty-free access, and by 2030 will give another 30%. But Bangladesh, without a free trade agreement, using their economic diplomacy, their geostrategic importance, they played their cards well, and they got access to 97% of the HS lines duty-free without a free trade agreement. Yeah. So this is the power of economic diplomacy, which we have not exercised and which they have exercised to their strength. Sri Lanka, of course, we've had a free trade agreement for quite a while. It is strategic, but it is small. Malaysia, we've got a trade agreement. We've got a preferential trade agreements with Mauritius. I'm not quite sure why we have ever entered that, but anyway, we do have it, and with Indonesia. And reflect upon it. The benefit of that really works toward the advantage of Malaysia and Indonesia, because we were going to buy cooking or edible oil anyway from them, so they continue to sell us. But the loss has been to our FBR because the duty we've had to lower as part of the free trade agreement. But apart from some recent initiatives by Indonesia to buy more goods from us, we haven't really benefited from these agreements. And of course, EU, UK, I've mentioned already. So moving on, our export basket remains narrow, and our regional reliance is also pretty not diversified. So 55% of our total exports go to the EU, UK, and USA. 62% of our total exports are reliant on textiles, and 74% of the textiles also go to EU, UK, and USA. So we have a narrow basket reliant on a very limited, market. And when that market suffers, as indeed it is going to suffer as we go along because of the monetary policy contraction in those countries, our exports are likely to suffer. The other, this is, I think, slightly widening it beyond textiles. If you take textiles, rice, and leather, our reliance has gone up actually from 2017 to now, from 66% to 70%, and our destination reliance also using these three commodities also gone up from 59 to from 51 to almost 60%. Okay, now this is a very interesting chart. Here, what we try to do is to look at global, demand, and on the top horizontal, you've got where the demand is growing and where the demand is declining. And on the right-hand side of the vertical axis, we've got where we are winning share, which is Pakistan is winning share, where we're losing share. I think, first of all, if you look at the totals, 43% of our exports are into commodities where we are losing share. And 59% of our total exports are where the global demand is going down. And alarmingly, about 20% of our total exports are where both the demand is going down and we are also losing share. And 40% is where we are winning share, but in a contracting demand sectors. And so this is not a very happy position to be in, and that needs to be corrected. So which means we have to widen our export basket and our other diversification of reliance, regional reliance. EU GSP plus, yes, that's very important. Most of our exports that go into EU are reliant on that, and we all know that that is going to come to an end. It may be renewed. What are they going to be the terms for that? And that's something that we need to watch out for. By the way, despite us having the GSP plus excess, and countries like Vietnam don't and China don't, they outsell us by multiple times. Okay, Africa should be a growth opportunity for us. So here we are trying to compare how India does in Africa versus how we do. They exported in 2020 just under 40 billion. We did 1.5 billion, so they outsold us by 25 times. They have a significantly higher share, therefore, of the total exports into Africa. They have 19 trade agreements. We have one with Mauritius, as we mentioned earlier. So they have more trade agreements. They have 35 people in country representation. So in all, there are about, by the way, 55 countries now in Africa. They used to be 54, but after Southern Sudan became independent, they're 55. So they are out of 55, they are now represented in 35 with people on the ground. We are represented in 9, which is significantly better, by the way, than about 4 or 5 years ago. So thanks to the good work that was done by the advisor, Commerce previously. So this has improved, but we're still underrepresented. Here's a stark difference of our negotiation power. We buy 600 million worth of tea, where we charge 10% duty. We sell about 800 million of rice and Kenya to Kenya, and they charge us 36% duty. So it's not like for like. So our economic diplomacy fails us, even in countries in Africa. Central Asia is another growth opportunity. Again, India outsells us, despite the fact that we are closer and then, subject to land access to Afghanistan or Iran. We could also be accessing Central Asia, and India does it again through principally Iran. Chabahar port, and they sold 422 million. We sold 116 million. And there's significant opportunity for Pakistan, particularly in foods, meat, sports goods, pharmaceutical products also. India sells 150. So about a third of the total 422 million was just pharmaceutical products. Pakistan is a signatory to something called the Quadrilateral Traffic in Transit Agreement, QTTA. And that's between Pakistan, China, and some of the Central Asian republics. But China has not ratified it, with the result that we don't have as good an access through China into these Central Asian republics, particularly Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan, by the way, is the largest economy there. So, you can't get there cost efficiently. And fruits and vegetables are perishable. So if your trucks have to wait for inspection, etc., on the Chinese border, then that doesn't help. They will perish. Of course, we are the least integrated. We are part of a region which is least integrated. Europe is 60% integrated in terms of regional trade. East Asia is 35%, Southeast Asia is 25%, South Asia is only 5%, and Pakistan and India are very low for reasons that we all know. So then moving on, FDI can play a very major role in promoting exports, and Vietnam is a classic model where Samsung alone represents 25% of the total exports. We have lots of FDI in players in Pakistan. I worked for one for 25 years, but they are all in the consumer product play. They do not export anything out of Pakistan, or not significant. I mean, 1%, 2%, 3%. They may be exporting. out of Pakistan. So their regional supply chains are not being fed from Pakistan. They're primarily fed from India and other countries. Now, FDI, is treated well in Pakistan. Look at the kind of share that they have in some of the categories. So pack daily, 80% share, home and personal care, 75, and so on and so forth. So they are significant players in our domestic economy. So they're reaping a demographic dividend, but they're not contributing to exports. So moving on then, productivity, which is, how efficiently you make things, has improved in the case of Pakistan by only 20% from 2009 to 2021. That's a period, significantly long period. Bangladesh in the same period improved by 67%, Vietnam by 77%, India by 86%, and China, of course, more than doubled. So some back of the envelope calculations are done. 30% improvement in productivity could add 8 billion of additional exports in the case of Pakistan. So it would, from 19%, another 30%. So, another 30% could bring in 8 billion of additional exports to Pakistan. If you look at the top right-hand chart, I mean, what that is trying to say is trying to say that our rebates are not properly targeted. The vertical axis here is trying to say what the global demand growth is. So where demand growth is only 2%, we are giving 2% rebate. Where demand growth is 4.5%, we give slightly more. But then we also give 4% where demand growth is only 1.8%. So it is not aligned to the global growth rate. And of course, there are categories where the global growth rate is 8.7%. We don't support those categories. The bottom right-hand chart is trying to depict what is the unit value that we command. So this is per kg or per square meter or per dozen or whatever would be relevant. So how do we rank in the global league of export league? So in rice, although we do a lot of basmati rice, we are 33rd in terms of the unit price that we get. In leather, we are 84th. In panties, we are 91st. Men's suiting 90, wet linen 88. So we're not able to command the premiums that our competitors can. 75% our export incentive system is so complicated that 75% of the exporters are simply don't have the capability of availing this. We have a very pro-incumbent bias. So whatever we've been exporting, we've been incentivizing. We've not looked at the opportunity of broadening the export basket. Services we don't incentivize at all through rebates. So you make a glass and you export, you'll get a rebate potentially. But if you do IT services or back office services or call centers, etc., you get no incentives, and therefore people keep the money abroad. FDI we've spoken about, so market access also we've covered. Our energy cost is one of the highest. That automatically impacts all your domestic consumers, but to the extent that we've been able, for the period that we've been able to give a regionally competitive energy to our exporters, we have seen the benefits of that. And I know there's a constant struggle for justifying this, but really, if you want to compete with countries like Bangladesh, Vietnam, China, and India, etc., you've got to give competitive energy. The right-hand chart is depicting labor cost. First, in the green part of it, it is I've differentiated Sindh from the rest of Pakistan because, as you know, the minimum wage was different when this chart was made. I believe now it is meant to be set, harmonized. It hasn't yet been done. But before adjusting for productivity, we were already higher than Bangladesh. Yeah. So, but if Bangladesh was 95, we were 114 in most of the country, but in Sindh, we were going to be 143. But when you adjust it for productivity, which, as we saw earlier, is significantly below, our labor cost adjusted for productivity is twice that of Bangladesh. So if you're going to compete with them in a panel which are labor intensive, you are not going to be able to compete with them. We are also not able to command premium, as we just saw, and here we've just taken the garment sector. And those of you who are from the textile will recognize the HS codes. I'm not an expert, but 61 and 62, series HS codes are for the kind of items that we export. So Pakistan, as compared to Cambodia or Vietnam is not able to command the kind of premiums that they are able to. Then, if you compare it with Bangladesh, again, our total exports of apparel, which are, used to be 1/3 of Bangladesh, are now 1/7 of Bangladesh. So Bangladesh is outcompeting us. Now, what needs to be done? So PVC has crafted a charter for exports, which we've updated once, and in this fast-moving world, we'll have to do it yet again. Where we are advocating that there has to be a long-term policy that the government must articulate, and should really ideally be seen or supervised or monitored by the Prime Minister, as the Bangladesh Prime Minister does. She meets the exporters frequently, at least once every quarter, and goes through their problems and tries to resolve them. And when a Prime Minister starts doing that, everything else tends to fall in place. We must promote scale, competitiveness. Turkey has got a very successful turf quality, where they've taken certain categories, not across the board, but they've taken certain categories, and they've done a lot of marketing to promote those categories. I know domestic appliances, for example, is one of those categories. Yeah? So we should have, not across the board, but we should do park quality, the turf quality equivalent. Our travel advisories are not conducive. So our economic, diplomacy, our foreign office should really be doing a better job in trying to get people to come to Pakistan. There should be a mechanism to wash export pricing clean of all levies. Today, we are able to if I am the manufacturer and I have not relied on any part of the supply chain in Pakistan, I've done all the imports myself and I export myself, of course, I'll be able to claim virtually all the imports. But that is not likely to happen, because for one thing, it's good that we should encourage SME integration into our export chains. But for in any case, most end exporters are reliant upon others. So they are unable to claim back all the levies that have been incurred in a complex supply chain. And India has now got a standardized system where, not for all categories, but for some categories, they've calculated a per unit export rebate, which automatically the end exporter ends up getting, and then in time is able to pass down the line. We've spoken about energy costs. We've spoken about skewing the incentives in a proper way. We've also spoken about having better free trade agreements. And I'll cover in a little while the importance of having export credit insurance, particularly if you want to broaden your or diversify your market reach. But all this the government has to do, but business also have to play their role. They have to sophisticate their offerings. They have to grow scale. Of course, our fiscal policy must promote scale, which it doesn't. And so, we won't go into the fiscal domain right now. We have to, there isn't, apart from one or two textile businesses where there is a foreign interest, but usually by Pakistani diaspora that is resident abroad, there is no genuine foreign-owned companies investing in the textile industry, which is our major export sector. And of course, we should continue to invest in capacity and sophistication of products, focus on the larger growth, lines, engineering in particular, and of course try and embed the SMEs. We must also be able to market or develop brands to market abroad. And of course, we must employ more women. I mean, one of the reasons why Bangladesh is very successful is the number of women that work, particularly in the garment industry. And that, of course, has other socioeconomic benefits, like, slowing down population growth and, creating financial inclusivity. Okay, so in my opinion, there's a substantial scope for Make in Pakistan. And what we've done is, again, look at it from a grow more, make more, and serve more. And I'll take you through it very briefly. If you look at grow more, it is as much to create import substitution as it is potentially to create export opportunities. So getting seeds right, getting intellectual property, getting the hybrid seeds in will be promote more cotton growth, as well as, of course, food, etc. And we'll be able to avoid imports, but potentially we could also become exporters. We've got to, consume water more efficiently. We've got to get farmers financed directly by the banks, not through the RP system. There's a plethora of things that we can do. We can promote meat exports. dairy, Pakistan can become the supplier of dairy to both China as well as the Middle Eastern countries, and so on. So that's in the grow more category. In the make more, pharmaceuticals has a huge potential. Engineering, I'm sure Almas will cover that. Domestic appliances can potentially be exported. We can get into some, transformers, furniture, tires. I think one good news that we have is the service tires, for example, through a venture with the Chinese, is going to potentially can export up to $500 billion worth of tires out of these are commercial vehicle tires, trucks, bus tires to USA alone. Cables can be exported, and so on, and we can get into man-made fibers also. So that's in the grow, in the make more, in the serve more. We need to have long-term predictable policies. These U-turns, sometimes the IT exports get, come into one type of fiscal regime, then they're taken out and put into another one. That's very confusing. And there's significant scope to do better in software, IT-enabled service, call centers, etc. So that's in that domain, but also in the infotainment business. The way that Hollywood, for example, has been able to integrate with platforms like Netflix, etc. We can do that. We can benefit from that. So there's a huge potential on serve more also. Now so far I've been mostly giving you bad news, but let me just give you some good news. Two major initiatives that have been taken by the government of Pakistan. One is on the Pakistan single window. I think that's an excellent initiative, and this will simplify the clearance of both inward and as well as outward. There's about 70 different authorities that are physically involved currently. All that will become computerized and digitized, which will cut down the number of days it takes to clear consignments. And we are very privileged that PBC was asked to nominate a member on the board. We've had a member from the beginning of the Pakistan Single Window Initiative. Pakistan Regulatory Modernization Initiative, which was led by the BOI, seems to have somehow come to a standstill, but for the period that was working for the last 2.5 years, I think there were a number of very useful initiatives that it took to, first of all, simplify the inter-provincial and provincial and federal interfaces, but also then, between the private sector and the government. And we were, of course, PBC was also represented on the steering committee, and we made the largest number of suggestions to simplify. One missing piece today, if you want to diversify your export reach, is that the EXIM Bank, which, by the way, has existed on paper for the last 4 years, but was officially empowered through a statute as recently as June of this year, and is yet to be funded. So you can't have a bank without any money, right? So that needs to be funded, and that must start offering credit insurance to countries like Africa and Central Asia. And India does a superb job on export credit. I mean, recently you must have heard that they, in order to help Sri Lanka, they gave export credit. They didn't just, ship out wheat or whatever rice that they wanted. They actually gave them export credit, so the Indians could export into Sri Lanka. But they've had export lines for Africa for a while. Okay, so at PBC, we've got a scorecard for Make in Pakistan, and we divide it into things like, is the currency competitive? And I think it is competitive. For a number of years it wasn't competitive. We won't go into that, but it is now competitive. Are the trade agreements conducive? We think we could do a lot better. By the way, we improved as a result of the number of studies that PBC supported the Ministry of Commerce. We renegotiated, but it still leaves a lot of room for doing better. In Bangladesh, is the comparative we use there. Cascading tariffs. Again, I think thanks to Razak Dawsa, there are a number of lines where raw materials and intermediate items now enjoy lower duty or duty-free access. So, the Pakistan industry has an opportunity to add value. Under-invoicing, smuggling, unfortunately, continues. We've on numerous occasions suggested that electronic data interface EDI should be exchanged, or agreement should be entered in with China in particular, not only for the goods that are covered by the free trade agreement, because they in any case the evasion level is low because the duty levels are low, but on the non-FTA and a number of other countries where under-invoicing takes place. Competitive energy, yes, it is for exporters, but only for the 5 sectors. There are other exporters that we need to develop, and they ought to also, where sensible, should be given competitive energy. But also domestic industry needs to be given. Where you have surplus generation capacity, you have to find a way to get that to users and the industry in particular. Is the fiscal policy equitable and consistent? We don't think it is. It is unpredictable. It is inconsistent. It leads to double taxation of intercorporate dividends, which are very important to gain scale, not only for export, but to just be competitive. And of course, our investment promotion policies, right? We believe TURF was a very good initiative that was taken. People can criticize how the TURF was utilized, but nevertheless, in aggregate, capacity has been expanded, and there will be benefits coming to Pakistan. So I think on that, I close and just to say that these are 3 more studies that PwC has done in the recent past, and to make the point that I think we need to get everybody on board and to work in harmony and in a very aligned manner if we want to get our exports up to where they ought to be. And on that note, I close my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ehsan sir. I think a very good overview. MashaAllah, great job done. But it seems that we're in the middle of a perfect storm where we can't seem to get our act together, neither the government nor the private sector, nor in our diplomacy. I think we're in a very depressing presentation. It seems we can't get our productivity right. It seems we can't get our economic diplomacy right. It seems we can't get our policy right. So it's a very depressing situation. So Almas, how would you react to all this?
Thank you very much, Nadeem sir, for inviting me, and thank you, Ehsan sir, for doing the hard work. Because ये सारी की सारी बातें जो मैंने कहनी थी वो आपने सारी कह दी. So I don't have much to say after what this presentation from Pakistan Business Council. I had not prepared a presentation because I thought I'll share some thoughts with all of you, and it is much better to respond to questions because then I am more customer focused than otherwise. Because otherwise I can talk of anything and everything under the sun, but I'd rather talk about things that interest the audience over here. Just a couple of anecdotes. The other day, one gentleman came to me. He makes nuts, bolts, and screws in Lahore, and he was complaining about the Chinese taking away his market in Pakistan. And I asked him about the FTA, and I asked him about the tariff and everything else. And then we talked of export also. Now, the problem with this industry in Pakistan is that China, although they pay about 7 times more salary and wages to their employees, they are so productive that after manufacturing in China and selling it to Pakistan, the products become cheaper, and most of them are coming through smuggling, so there's no tariff on it. So obviously, they were facing a problem. And the problem was their own efficiency. If they could make themselves efficient, they would beat the Chinese hollow even in the Pakistan market, and they would be able to sell well outside the Pakistan market also. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is when I was the president of Lahore Chamber of Commerce, we looked at the complete tariff, custom duties and tariffs, and we took a comprehensive document to the ministry. Razak Dausa was there. We worked together, and fortunately, a lot of those tariffs have been set right. And because of that, the local industry this year or the last year was probably the most profitable year for industry ever. The reason was that we were more competitive, we had better margins, and well, then things happened after that. And at this time, probably we are all facing some amount of difficulty. As for export to Africa, we went to Africa, took a delegation over there about 3 years back. And we were having a dinner with all the ambassadors. I think there are 14 or 16 ambassadors in Africa from Pakistan. So we had a dinner at the Kenyan ambassador's home, and I asked them how many trade agreements does Pakistan have with Africa. By the way, Mauritius is an island outside Africa. They do not consider it, and you can't sell to Mauritius and then sell it to the rest of the continent. So there is an issue over there. So the ambassador said that we have nearly zero agreement. I said, how many agreements does India have with Africa? And they said something like 32. Sir, your number was 19. Probably your number is more accurate. But our ambassadors didn't even know how many trade agreements India had with African countries. If you have no agreement with the trade agreement with the best and most the biggest market that we can get. So Africa is a market which is not looking for very high quality, and we don't make very good quality. So probably for us, it is the most appropriate market where we can go and sell, and we haven't worked for even a single trade agreement in that region. So that's sad, and says a lot about the real desire for export from the government of Pakistan. Our private sector people do go there. They do sell. Some have sold tractors. Others have sold some motorbikes. Others have sold some other commodities over there, but not much really. I don't think it's more than $1 billion worth of export to the whole of that continent, which is over $1 trillion market. Engineering industry, very rightly pointed out by Ehsan Sahab, the largest sectors of global trade are apart from oil and gas, are in the engineering sector. The electrical power, for example, is about $2 point something trillion worth of trade happening in the world. We manufacture transformers over here. We manufacture cables over here. We manufacture switchgear over here, towers over here, everything. We make a lot of things over here. I've been trying to help the local industry look at export. There are some technical issues. There are some issues of quality and some issues of registration that everyone faces when they want to sell to the heavy power sector in the world. Unfortunately, I think there's a culture issue also. We are very comfortable with what is happening in Pakistan. We make good money in Pakistan. It's a very large market, and most of our people don't go beyond that. When I start talking to people about exports, the first thing they want to know is, how do I get a customer? So people don't even know how to find a customer abroad. The second thing they don't know is what is FOB and what is CNF and what is CIF and FOR and these Incoterms. Our universities, unfortunately, have failed to train our business graduates for export. I don't know of any university who is giving MBA in international trade. So we are very inward-looking sort of a culture, and we are not doing much for exports. Our current account deficit, rightly pointed out again, our export is about plus minus $30 billion. Our remittance is about $32 billion. Our import is about $70-80 billion. We have a deficit of $12-13-14 billion, and that deficit is killing us. The government just stopped imports for a couple of months, and look what has happened in the last 10 days. Rupee has revalued by more than 8%. So the disease is very clear, and we must either reduce our imports or we have to increase our exports to be able to survive. Remittances are good, but they can go anytime. One country gets angry with the policies of Pakistan, and our remittances will go down by several $1 billion. So that's very flimsy. So those are the areas that we need to work on. The last thing that I would like to say before I open myself for questions is that you can't export taxes. So the same guy, the guy who was making the screws and nuts and bolts, I asked him, why don't you export? He said, कि जी हमें जो tax है वो वापस नहीं होता है. I said, why not? मतलब you should be able to get all your taxes back if you really put your mind to it. उन्होंने कहा सर वो जो एडिशनल कस्टम ड्यूटी है ना वो वापस नहीं होती, बाकी सारे टैक्स हो जाते हैं और हमारे पे एडिशनल कस्टम ड्यूटी I think it was 14% or 18%, something like that. ओके जी वो हमारी वापस नहीं हो सकती है, इसलिए हम एक्सपोर्ट नहीं कर सकते हैं. The government has to understand that we cannot export taxes, and irrespective of who is exporting and where they are exporting, all taxes must be refunded quickly. And unless that happens, we will not produce the culture that we require for export, and we will continue to reel under the pressure that we are today in. So thank you very much, and I'm open for questions, obviously after the next speaker, but I'm here to respond to the questions.
Thank you very much, Almas Sahab. Mashallah, as I said, it's a perfect storm. Not only don't we have a incompetent government, our private sector is uncompetitive, we have bad economic diplomacy, but we also have a culture of satisfaction where we think that if you've got a few hundred crore rupees, you've got a Land Cruiser, we don't need to go anymore. So we don't have an Elon Musk or a Steve Jobs culture, we won't go forward. Shahid Sahab, bataiye, you are APTMA, you mashallah responsible for exports. What is the problem? Why can't you guys export?
I first of all must congratulate Ehsan Malik for producing an outstanding review of the situation, and which sums it all up. However, I'd like to start off with a very pertinent mention that we invested heavily through turf in new plants and machinery, upgradation, so forth. And we've got quite a few units which have already come on stream, quite a few that are coming on stream, so to speak. But all of them have not been given the energy they need to operate. They don't have the gas, they don't have the electricity. So all of these guys, all of these people who expanded their businesses or in order to create more capacity in Pakistan are now, in fact, cursing me, saying, we have gone for this thing we've gone for this expansion, and this expansion is now just standing there without being utilized. And who will service the debts? Who will serve? It's created a situation where fresh investment coming into the sector is going to be extremely difficult. Under the circumstances, I can tell you that all the people, in fact, the entire sector that did invest and is now going to look at things far more critically. And this sort of thing, when it happens, kills any initiative to expand or to increase. When government policies are not consistent, government even today is supplying gas to other priorities and not to the export sector. The again, I wrote 2 articles some time ago, The Snake and the Ladder, which basically state that, we take off multiple times, we've started to take off, but then something or the other happens, and government policies change, all of a sudden priorities change, and the whole thing comes crashing down. This has happened multiple times. And I'm afraid I've become a big skeptic at the moment. The textile sector, large part of it is represented by the PVC as well as APTMA, has performed pretty well in the last 2 years. It's increased exports from roughly 12.5, 13 billion to 19.45 billion last year. This is a very commendable achievement, but in order to sustain this, you do need certain things to happen, certain policies to continue, certain policies to be made. The first and foremost of them, in my opinion, is working capital. Given that our currency has depreciated 60-70% in the last year, we had textile exports worth just over 2 trillion, and today they're worth well over 3 trillion. Yet our working capital has not increased. And because it has not increased, the exporters are facing huge issues with the financing the export cycle. The export cycle, as all here are aware, is 4, 5, 6 months. And to finance those 4, 5, 6 months, you need double the amount of currency now, which is certainly not there. And all of this comes back to the situation where, in order to tax or impose sales tax on the textile sector, on domestic sales of textiles, you've imposed the sales tax on the entire sector, so you collect 350 million a year. You refund 350 billion a year. You refund most of it, and you retain roughly 60 billion. What that has done is it soaked up the liquidity of the sector that was available with the sector, and it's created a further shortage. Your EFS, or the Export Finance Scheme, just does not cover this sort of lack of working capital. So we really need to think as to how can our exports grow if we have no energy to run or operate our plants. We don't have working capital. And then each time, we are fighting an existential situation. Like the regionally competitive energy tariffs require a full-time follow-up with the government at all stages, and we have multiple situations where it is questioned that this is a subsidy to the rich, and various things are said which make it extremely difficult for the government also to give us competitive tariffs. I can't see getting out of this perfect storm that we have created in the near future. And we have a real issue because at the moment, Chapter 84, 85 imports have been stopped by the State Bank, which included spare parts for all the machinery that is operating in the sector, which included spare parts and parts of the electricity or the gas supply setups of each of the mills. They've stopped all solar panel imports and whatever associated with it. So slowly, the sector is being strangulated. It would be a miracle if we are able to retain exports at the current level today. I don't even think that is possible. I hate to be saying this, but I think we'll actually see 2 to 3 billion less exports this year than last year. When the reality is that unless we enhance our exports, we will not come out of our existential threat. So I leave it at that, because I'm not talking of the long-term or the medium-term situations and analysis, which has beautifully been encapsulated by both Almas Saab and by BBC. I'm just talking of the current situation as is, and I'm happy to answer questions with respect to any part of this, what I've said. Thank you.
Thank you, folks. Thank you, Shahid. Thank you, sir. Everybody, let me open the floor for discussion, but let me begin with a couple of questions. I think what all of you have kind of pointed out reads like a Stephen King novel, where, people get together in a strange psychotic relationship and eventually end up destroying each other. It seems like the government and the private sector have got into this dance where they're kind of, I don't know what game they're playing, but the game is leading to a MAD, mutually assured destruction. How do we break this cycle? Ehsan sahab bataiye. Isn't the job of business to kind of navigate whatever framework it is, innovate and find solutions to a problem? If you guys were really keen on exporting, would you not be able to do it? Think about the companies that you've served, the international companies. Think about McDonald's or even Unilever. Unilever is making record profits here. I think it's going at 25-30% a year. Why are our businesses not doing that? McDonald's is growing very rapidly. So am I wrong? Is there a disconnect here, or what's the story, Ehsan sir?
Okay, so when you say that McDonald's is growing at whatever rate, and Unilever is growing at whatever rate, they're growing essentially by serving the domestic market. Yeah, they're not growing by exporting.
Okay.
And so the question that you could ask is, why are they not exporting? I think that will be more relevant question. So even well-organized companies like the ones that you mentioned fail to export. I mean, maybe McDonald's model is not to export anything to Pakistan anyway, but Unilever ought, at least on paper, be able to export something or the other, right? But they can't. And they can't because for the number of factors that we try to list, productivity is lower, although in their plants it must be higher. But their plants in Pakistan, despite having higher productivity, the rest of Pakistan may still be lower than, let's say, their plants in other countries because of the environment in which those countries operate. So they may not enjoy the same scale like they do, for example, in India or in Vietnam. So scale plays a role. Consistency of policy plays a major role. Pakistan's export, or for that matter, any policy, really, you take fiscal policies, they're not consistent. They're not even equitable. So their nature, they're there to seek revenue for a short term. They're not really medium to long term oriented. So all those factors work against exports in general, but particularly for the kind of organization that you were talking about.
Almas sahab, bataiye, isn't productivity a management issue? Shouldn't you be able to increase your productivity? Ehsan sahab ने बिल्कुल ठीक कहा कि जी चले डोमेस्टिक मार्केट, पर क्या हमारी कंपनीज डोमेस्टिक मार्केट में भी ग्रो कर रही है? आपकी इंजीनियरिंग सेक्टर, am I wrong, has performed very badly in Pakistan. Despite all the subsidies, it has not grown at all. Deletion program आपका चल नहीं रहा. खैर मेरा तो ख्याल है वो बड़ा poor program था. It was badly conceptualized, and there's no such thing as deletion. But खैर that's beside the point. हम लोग EDB deletion बनाती रहती है. I don't know why, but मुझे बताइए प्रोडक्टिविटी क्यों नहीं हम बढ़ा सकते? आप माशाल्लाह इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट हैं, मैनेजर्स हैं. Why can't you increase productivity? और आपका इंजीनियरिंग सेक्टर क्यों मर रहा है?
Sir, let me narrate the story of Samsung. Samsung ने वियतनाम के अंदर जब अपना प्रोजेक्ट लगाया तो वहाँ पे एक उनको स्टेबल एनवायरनमेंट दे के गवर्नमेंट ने सपोर्ट किया और आज कोई $25 बिलियन की एक्सपोर्ट है, सम से $40 बिलियन जो कि इस वक्त वियतनाम से एक्सपोर्ट कर रहा है सैमसंग. हमने 2 साल पहले यहाँ पे सारे टैरिफ की रीस्ट्रक्चरिंग करके we forced all of these companies to come to Pakistan and set up their shop over here. So वहाँ यहाँ पे लोकल वो सैमसंग वाले आ गए और साथ ही वो चाइनीज भी कुछ लोग आ गए. और when we were inducting them and allowing them to set up plants in Pakistan, we were also talking of exports. So उन्होंने उस वक्त के जो एडवाइज़र थे कॉमर्स के, उनके साथ बातचीत की. उन्होंने कहा जी देखें ये सारे पार्ट्स हमारे पेरेंट कंपनी से आते हैं, हमें वियतनाम की जो गवर्नमेंट है वो इतने % जो है वो एक्सपोर्ट सब्सिडी देती है. वो एक्सपोर्ट सब्सिडी के साथ फिर हम अपनी एक्सपोर्ट यहाँ से करते हैं एंड वो जो लोकल वैल्यू एडिशन है उसका बेनिफिट लोकल मार्केट को हो जाता है और बाकी के डॉलर्स आ जाते हैं उसके. So we decided to help them also and we go ahead with them. Then suddenly when this government came in, इन्होंने जो पहला ये जो डिस्ट्रेस में आके इन्होंने कहा कि सब लोगों की हम एलसीआं जो है ना वो कट डाउन करने लगे और एलसीआं जो है 50% सीकेडी आएगी अब. और अच्छा, that the whole industry had promised us $1 billion of export in 2023. And I think all of that is gone. One of the reasons why people don't invest in Pakistan nor take a long term, because export के अंदर आप short term view नहीं ले सकते इंजीनियरिंग इंडस्ट्री के साथ. अगर आपने ट्रैक्टर एक्सपोर्ट करना है तो ट्रैक्टर के स्पेयर पार्ट्स होंगे, उसकी वहाँ पे मेंटेनेंस होगी, उसकी वर्कशॉप्स होंगी, उसकी ट्रेनिंग्स होंगी, बहुत कुछ करेंगे, फिर जाके आप एक ट्रैक्टर एक्सपोर्ट कर सकते हैं. हमने कंसिस्टेंटली वो अपनी पॉलिसीज को फॉर वॉट एवर रीजन हम उनको सडनली चेंज कर देते हैं और उस सडन चेंज की वजह से वो जिसने भी कोई प्लान बनाया होता है वो एक्सपोर्ट कर ही नहीं सकता. आई नो कि मेरे कोई पार्ट्स थे जो कि मैंने जापान एक्सपोर्ट करने थे लॉन्ग टाइम अगो एंड देन समथिंग हैपेंड इन पाकिस्तान एट दैट टाइम एंड द जापानीज जस्ट केम टू मी एंड सेड कि नहीं यार your environment is very inconsistent and we just can't buy from you. We want, if we buy a component from you, we want to buy it for the next 5 years and with a shipment every 15 days. और अगर तुम लोग ये नहीं कर सकते हो तो फिर then we can't buy from you, and they've not bought from us. So there is a huge amount of inconsistency in the environment and इसलिए यहाँ पे ये नहीं हो सका. आपने एक्सपोर्ट के अलावा जो आपने डिलीशन प्रोग्राम की बात की, बाय द वे देयर इज नो डिलीशन प्रोग्राम इन पाकिस्तान. It ended in 2006. So your Nadeem sahab, your information is obsolete.
Thank you, Almas sir, for correcting me. But I hope you don't want to create another deletion program.
No, sir, we don't. And मैंने आपको जो बात की है इनकंसिस्टेंसी की, उसकी वजह से हमें बार-बार रुकावट आती है, बार-बार दिक्कत आती है.
इंजीनियरिंग सेक्टर बताएं क्यों इतना कमजोर है? इतनी हमने इसको सब्सिडी दी है, इतना हमने कोशिश की है बनाने की, चढ़ता क्यों?
सर जो हम सब्सिडी देते हैं वो लोकल मार्केट के लिए देते हैं, एक्सपोर्ट के लिए नहीं देते हैं. और हमारे पास जो एक्सपोर्ट के जो प्रोडक्ट हैं और जो हम डेवलप करना लगते हैं, फॉर एग्जांपल एट वन टाइम वी वर एक्सपोर्टिंग मोटर बाइक्स फ्रॉम पाकिस्तान. वी आर नॉट डूइंग दैट एनी मोर. एंड अगेन समथिंग हैपेंड मतलब व्हाइल दैट वाज हैपनिंग, और एक शिपमेंट आपकी वक्त पे नहीं गई, 2 शिपमेंट वक्त पे नहीं गई, कस्टमर नहीं लेता उसके बाद. We have a very, very unstable ये जो है एनवायरनमेंट, इसका आपका पॉलिसी एनवायरनमेंट, ये रोज एक नई पॉलिसी आती है, रोज सुबह हम अखबार उठ के इसलिए पढ़ते हैं ताकि ये पता लगे कि आज हमने क्या फैसले करने हैं। होना ये चाहिए कि हम शाम को अखबार पढ़ें, सारा दिन काम कर चुके हों और शाम को आगे पढ़ें ताकि पता लगे कि दुनिया के अंदर क्या हुआ है। हम रोज सुबह अपनी कंपनी पॉलिसी बनाने के लिए अखबार पढ़ के आते हैं।
बट येट शाहिद साहब, कमिंग टू यू, मुझे बताइए, जितना एप्टमा का एक्सेस है, जितना ईडीबी का एक्सेस है, जितना पीबीसी का एक्सेस है, हम लोग तो सारे ड्रीम भी नहीं कर सकते इतने एक्सेस का। सारा दिन तो पॉलिसी टेबल्स पे आप लोग बैठे होते हैं, फिर आप लोग व्हाई कांट यू इन्फ्लुएंस पॉलिसी टू बी स्टेबल? इज इट बिकॉज द बिजनेस सेक्टर इज फाइटिंग अगेंस्ट ईच अदर फॉर सब्सिडीज, या क्या? व्हाट इज द रीजन फॉर दिस अनस्टेबल पॉलिसी? जरा इस पे भी रिफ्लेक्ट।
That is not correct. The business circles are not fighting. I mean, there is unanimity in this कि जी regionally competitive tariffs होने चाहिए, export sector को gas, बिजली की priority होनी चाहिए, लेकिन we have, I mean, our basic issue in Pakistan at the moment stems from our lack of energy. अगर आपके पास एनर्जी नहीं है तो आप उस क्या फैक्ट्री लगाएंगे, क्या क्रिएट करेंगे? एग्रीकल्चरल प्रोडक्टिविटी इज अ सेपरेट इशू. वहां पे प्रोडक्टिविटी इज नॉट डिपेंडेंट ऑन इलेक्ट्रिसिटी, बट द सेपरेट इश्यूज फॉर दैट. बट जो आपका इंडस्ट्रियल सेक्टर है, दैट जस्ट कैन नॉट एग्जिस्ट विदाउट द प्रोविजन ऑफ स्टेबल रीजनली कंपेटिटिव एनर्जी. एंड अगर ये चीजें नहीं हो सकती, नहीं मिल सकती, तो वी आर जस्ट फाइटिंग अ लूजिंग बैटल.
क्यों जी? अपना एहसान साहब, हाउ वुड यू आंसर दिस क्वेश्चन कि जी ये शायद साहब जो कह रहे हैं रीजनली कंपेटिटिव टैरिफ्स हो एंड गिव अस चीप एनर्जी, बट दैट मींस देन वी हैव टू विथड्रॉ गैस फ्रॉम द फर्टिलाइजर सेक्टर. So if we withdraw gas from the fertilizer sector, give it to...
Sir, why do you say the fertilizer sector? Why don't we talk about the elephant in the room?
Which
That
is?
The bulk of our energy goes to non-productive use. अभी मैंने article भी लिखा है जो अभी published नहीं हुआ, which compares the amount of energy that is used in various economies, in productive sectors and in non-productive sectors.
What are non-productive sectors, Shahid Sahab? I don't know what non-productive sectors are.
Non-productive sectors are basically your domestic and your household use. उसमें देखें, I mean, in Pakistan, the bulk, 60% of your energy goes towards the household sector, whether in gas or electricity. और वो आगे उससे क्या, I mean, in the other countries, that is not the case. Not only does it go there, it goes there at a cost and a price that is not sustainable. I mean, आप सोचें कि गैस की अभी तक जो बिलिंग है to the domestic sector is roughly 120 rupees जो first slab है. एंड बिजली की वो शायद थोड़ी सी बेहतर हो गई है, लेकिन वो भी कोई, I mean, it's maybe 1/10 of the cost.
Yes, Hansab, how would you react to that?
No, so I was actually going to say that, you mentioned that there are so many business bodies and businesses that are trying to create the right environment. ये तो आप इस तरफ से देख रहे हैं, उस तरफ से भी जरा देखेंगे how many ministries are there that one has to contend with. There's a lot of fragmentation in the, first of all, the federal government. उसमें Ministry of Commerce कुछ आ रही होती है, Ministry of Industry कुछ आ रही होती है, then there is power, वो कुछ और ही आ रही होती है, and then there's the taxman. To name just 4. इसके अलावा और भी कई, right, जो involved होती है. तो उसमें इनकी आपस में जो है ना fragmentation रहती है, आपस में टसल रहता है. And I think शायद साहब को इसका मुझसे ज़्यादा इल्म होगा कि ये जो रीजनली कंपैरेटिव इलेक्ट्रिसिटी की बात हो रही है, एनर्जी की बात हो रही है, इसमें there is a difference of opinion between the Ministry of Commerce and the the Ministry of that controls the supply of energy. इनका आपस में टसल चलता रहता है. तो ये बात कहनी गलत होगी कि बिजनेसेस आपस में को आउट कम्पीट करने की कोशिश कर रही होती हैं कि जी ये टेक्सटाइल को मिल जाए या ना मिले या किसी और इंडस्ट्री को मिल जाए। आई थिंक ऐसा नहीं है। आई थिंक इन जनरल all industry wants is competitive energy, whether it is for domestic or export. Obviously, also export has priority. Within that, certain sectors have even higher priority. But that said, I think it's the other side where there's a lot of fragmentation and lack of clarity. And of course, one spoiler is NAB, your National Accountability Board. Sab log, there's a decision paralysis in the bureaucracy. वो लोग डरते हैं सिर्फ ब्यूरोक्रेसी में नहीं है, ये तो आपकी पॉलिटिकल लीडरशिप में भी है। तो पॉलिटिकल लीडर्स भी जो है वो कैबिनेट तक जो है वो डरती है कि जी अब ये कर लेंगे तो इससे ये कॉन्सिक्वेंस होगा, बाद में ये होगा। So we need, there's a lot of house that needs to be put in order. It's not only the business that has to do better. I think the government has to align its policies. आपको मालूम होगा कि पाकिस्तान में इस वक्त कोई इंडस्ट्रियल पॉलिसी नहीं है, इस वक्त कोई जनरल एक्सपोर्ट पॉलिसी नहीं है। Yes, there is a so-called textile policy, right? तो जब एक पॉलिसी के बगैर आप मिनी पॉलिसीज बनाएंगे तो उसमें तो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट की और गुंजाइश पैदा हो जाएगी ना। तो आई थिंक दैट इज the environment in which we are operating.
Sir, I'd just like to add over here कि अभी in the recent 2 months हमारे जो imports हैं under chapter 84-85 रोके गए and उनको I mean बजाय ये कि हमें कोई negative list दे दें कि जी ये चीजें आप नहीं मंगवा सकते या ये चीजों की prior approval चाहिए, what they want from us is a list of positive items that we can import or we should be allowed to import, which I have explained to all concerned कि जी ये positive list नहीं बन सकती because there are so many multiple articles that go into the exports of textiles कि जी you can't just list out the items that you will be requiring to make the, like for example RFID tags हैं for various apparel, clothing, and so on. For example, spare parts for some ये मशीनरी सड़ गई किसी की recently, उसने जर्मनी से मंगवाया, उसको क्लियरेंस नहीं करने दे रहे, कंट्रोलर कार्ड्स। I mean, it just is not possible to say what you will require at what stage and with. So even the Ministry of Commerce is not prepared to understand that you can't encompass all the articles that you will require for exports and just create a small negative list that you do need to do so at this current time. But so मैं कितने लोगों को कितनी दफा समझाऊं, कैसे समझाऊं, जब वो सुनने को तैयार ही नहीं है। They are insisting on कि जी आप सिर्फ positive list बनाएं उन items की जो मंगवा सके. Otherwise, the State Bank is not issuing foreign exchange for that. So under these circumstances, business या exports कैसे चलेंगी? It's simply not going to be possible. What is going to happen is that slowly and surely exports will start going down, industrial output will start going down. Yet this realization just simply does not come home to the bureaucracy.
Just to add, in this atmosphere of firefighting, where you are curbing your imports and artificially managing the balance of trade, उसमें हो ये रहा है कि some people are drawing the conclusion कि अगर एक महीने में आपने इतना कर्व कर लिया तो उसको आप 12 से ज़र्ब दे दें तो साल में तो आपके सब प्रॉब्लम रिजॉल्व हो गए, राइट? तो आपका तो करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट जो है वो खत्म हो जाएगा, तो कम से कम उतनी फंडिंग तो आपकी रिक्वायरमेंट तो खत्म हो, right? And I've actually seen some so-called experts on chat shows doing that, and this is actually concerning because if you keep repeating something that is wrong multiple times and so-called experts do it, sooner or later you start believing it. तो फिर आप ये कहेंगे जी इनकी इन चीजों की इम्पोर्ट की जरूरत ही नहीं थी हमको, तो रहने दे फिर हमारा तो फिर करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट आराम से हो जाएगा, मैनेज हो जाएगा।
अच्छा, मुझे ये बताइए एहसान साहब, थोड़ी सी बात, एंड आई थिंक ऑल थ्री ऑफ यू, हमारी इंडस्ट्री में R&D कितनी है?
आई थिंक ये बेहतर आंसर कर देंगे अलमास और शाहिद साहब।
जी शाहिद साहब, अलमास साहब, कोई R&D है आपके पास?
सर R&D के जो है ना वो 2-3 लेवल होते हैं। पहला लेवल तो है जहाँ पे आप उसकी बेसिक रिसर्च कर रहे हो, या वो रिसर्च नॉर्मली यूनिवर्सिटियों में होती है, और आपको भी पता
नहीं, मैं
होगा।
R&D की बात कर रहा हूँ जी, सिंपल। हम ये नहीं बात कर रहे कि आप एटम दरियाफ्त करें, मतलब R&D तो सिंपल चीज होती है, अपनी पैकेजिंग इंप्रूव कर ले, अपने प्रोडक्ट डिजाइन इंप्रूव कर ले, अपनी मार्केटिंग इंप्रूव कर ले, अपने प्रोसेस, ये चीज है कोई कि नहीं?
नहीं, उसको फिर R&D नहीं कहते हैं, वो रिसर्च एंड डेवलपमेंट का एरिया नहीं आता। फिर वो आपकी काइजन है या इम्प्रूवमेंट है कि आप कभी पैकेजिंग इंप्रूव करें, कभी प्रिंटिंग इंप्रूव करें, कभी डिजाइन इंप्रूव करें, कभी कुछ और इंप्रूव करें। अगर आपको याद हो तो महातिर का जो 2020 का जो विजन था, वहां पे उसने एक यू कर्व बनाया था। उस यू कर्व के ऊपर रिसर्च का जो एलिमेंट है उसके ऊपर हाईएस्ट वैल्यू एडिशन थी, फिर ये डेवलपमेंट के अंदर लोअर थी, और जो मैन्युफैक्चरिंग थी इट हैज द लोएस्ट वैल्यू एडिशन। उसके बाद मार्केटिंग आती है, उसके बाद ब्रांडिंग आती है, जो वहाँ पे दोबारा वैल्यू एडिशन बढ़नी शुरू हो जाती है। हमारा मसला ये नहीं है जो आपका सवाल है, हमारा मसला ये है कि मैन्युफैक्चरिंग से आगे या पीछे क्यों नहीं निकल रहे। हम अपने डिजाइन करके प्रोडक्ट क्यों नहीं बना रहे हैं, या हम अपने प्रोडक्ट को खुद मार्केट क्यों नहीं करते, हम जाके वॉलमार्ट को क्यों देते हैं, हम जाके इस तरह से जो बहुत बड़ी बड़ी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस हैं उनको बेच के हमारे फुटबॉल जो है वो एडिडास को चले जाते हैं, यहाँ से वो $5-10 का जाता होगा, वहाँ वो $365 का बिकता है। सो ये जो वैल्यू एडिशन का जो कर्व है वो तो जाके वो मैन्युफैक्चरिंग के या राइट साइड पे या लेफ्ट साइड पे है। द क्वेश्चन शुड बी कि यार हम उधर मूव क्यों नहीं कर रहे हैं। ये R&D अगर मैं कर भी लूंगा और फिर मैं उसी कस्टमर को दूंगा तो तकरीबन उतने पैसों का मेरा बिकेगा ना। So I think we need to talk about the complete U curve whenever possible, maybe another session, और उसके बगैर हमारी वैल्यू एडिशन नहीं बढ़ सकती है।
चलिए जी, मे बी इट्स अ क्वेश्चन ऑफ टर्मिनोलॉजी, बट द पॉइंट इज कि दुनिया जहान में जो इंडस्ट्री आजकल है वो चल रही है, चाहे R&D कह रहे हैं चाहे कुछ कह ले, द पॉइंट इज एवरी एप्पल जो है फॉर एग्जांपल अपनी जो पैकेजिंग का डिजाइन है उसमें पैसे बहुत लगता है। एप्पल जो है अपनी, मैं मतलब आई एम जस्ट सर्वाइव स्टडी दीज थिंग्स, तो वो हर चीज में पैसे लगाते हैं। Amazon जो है अपनी लास्ट माइल पे पैसे लगाता है। R&D to my mind is just whatever you need to solve your problem, develop a brand name, move forward, improve your logistics, whatever it is, just improve your productivity. And Shahid Sahab, does Textile have it? There are about 500 textile spinning mills, I think, or 400, पता नहीं कितनी हैं, जो अभी एहसान मलिक साहब ने अपनी स्लाइड पे भी लिखा होता, why the hell don't you guys consolidate?
Sir, first of all, अब आप देखिए कि जो हमारे यहाँ जो टेक्सटाइल सेक्टर हैज नॉट ग्रोन, I mean, हमारी इंडिविजुअल कंपनी साइज इज मच स्मॉलर देन दैट इन इंडिया. इंडिया में यू क्रिएटेड वर्ल्ड क्लास कंपनीज इन द टेक्सटाइल सेक्टर. पाकिस्तान में एक भी कंपनी नहीं है जो कि वर्ल्ड क्लास हो. उसकी कई वजूहात हैं. पहली वजूहात तो ये कि आर टेक्सटाइल सेक्टर हैज नॉट येट grown out of the family run business paradigm, and that unless that is somehow broken and you get away and move away from that, things cannot start to improve. जो आप बात कर रहे हैं to add value through design and through these things come at a scale when you are operating at a world scale. पाकिस्तान में एक कंपनी बता दें which operates at a world scale. So our manufacturers are very happy if they land an order to say Levi's, We are probably the biggest supplier to Levi's of jeans. But they're branded by Levi's. They buy it from us at, as Almas Saab said, at $5, and they sell it at $150. Similarly, in all other things, जो अगर आप देखें उठा के who our customers are, and our customers are these brand names abroad who buy from us, then rebrand the product and sell it. The specifications are also made by these brand names. कोई specifications पाकिस्तान में नहीं बनती. We are. Let me also say something.
Go ahead.
Say something nice about our exporting sector. Our exporting sector जो है, उसमें जो productivity है is way better than the sector. That part of the sector that's only focused on domestic markets. Productivity भी बेहतर है, quality भी बेहतर है. Obviously, you can't sell into the international market unless you have a basic benchmark on quality. Competitiveness enforces you to have efficiency criteria, and also then the Western buyers, they also impose our social as well as environmental and other constraints before you can sell to them. So in order to meet all those and to be able to sell, we do all those things willingly for those buyers, but we don't do it because we think it's right. We do it in order to be able to sell. I'm not going to try and guess why is it not in our culture to have, innovate and to have.
वही तो मैं आपको कह रहा हूँ, शाहिद साहब, we are in a perfect storm. Government incompetent and culture भी हमारा खराब. आप प्राइवेट सेक्टर में भी आप कह रहे हैं कि छोटी बिजनेसेस हैं. ये एहसान साहब आपसे मैं पूछना चाहता हूँ, we did some research which you might have seen, कि हमारी जो कंपनीज हैं, if we take out for a start, let's look at the stock market. We did a paper on the stock market, कि हमारी stock market बहुत strange. It actually gives the secret of why we don't grow. एक तो stock market is declining, और हमारी इंडस्ट्री जो सारी वो डेट पे चलती है, स्टॉक मार्केट पे नहीं चलती, इक्विटी फाइनेंसिंग नहीं करते ज्यादा. इक्विटी फाइनेंसिंग इज वेरी वीक, एंड राइटली सो, बिकॉज द स्टॉक मार्केट इज डिक्लाइनिंग, पीई गिरता रहता है. तो मेरा ख्याल हम स्टॉक मार्केट खत्म ही कर दे तो बेहतर है. दूसरी चीज जो है, स्टॉक मार्केट में हमने देखा इंडस्ट्रियल कंसंट्रेशन बहुत ज्यादा है. ओनली 31 फैमिलीज वर्चुअली ओन द स्टॉक मार्केट. सेकेंडली, जो 31 फैमिलीज के या PSX 100 के जो हैं बोर्ड मेंबर्स, वो तो एक छोटा सा क्लब है. I mean, nobody else can get into the board members. The corporate governance से नजर आ जाती है कि जी वो relatives हैं और थोड़े से friends हैं. तो एक तो ये, दूसरी चीज ये है कि competitive market नहीं है. And then of course जो शायद साहब ने बात की, बड़ी अच्छी बात की, you mashallah were a professional in multinationals, and our multinationals have used, for example, Shaukat, yourself, many people, professionals चलाते हैं. वो लोग आते भी नहीं यहाँ. मतलब I've never seen a CEO of a big company coming to Pakistan. Local professionals चलाते हैं. Why is it that our business sector is so weak? कि professionalizing में अभी तक family चला रही है. Is that one reason why we can't export or serve the domestic market?
Okay, so if I have a go at this, I think one of the reasons why our stock market is narrow is that our the entire policy or regulatory framework that governs the listing, etc., is so complicated. Number one. Number two, any incentives that were previously offered to list and therefore accord by a higher standard of governance and professionalism, etc., have been withdrawn. टैक्स क्रेडिट होता था, वो विड्रॉ कर दिया गया. अच्छा, अगर आप ये देखें, कंसोलिडेशन की बात हो रही थी, तो if for example an existing group wishes to expand and set up subsidiaries, तो इंटर कॉर्पोरेट डिविडेंड के ऊपर डबल टैक्सेशन हो जाता है. तो पहले तो वो जो सब्सिडरी है वो अपने प्रॉफिट पे टैक्स देती है, फिर वो जब डिविडेंड पेरेंट कंपनी को देती है वो डिविडेंड टैक्स चार्ज हो जाता है। उसके बाद जब पेरेंट कंपनी आगे अपने शेयर होल्डर्स को डिस्ट्रीब्यूट करती है तो एक another set of dividend taxes levied. So the fiscal environment is totally not conducive to listing or for setting up of groups, which would then lead to certain consolidation. So I think that is one thing. The other thing is कि जो हमारी SMEs हैं, if they want to come onto the stock market, they have to face a very close scrutiny by the taxman. Because the taxman कहता है जी पहले आपने जो किया था पहले तो आप उसका हिसाब दें, फिर हम आपको आने देंगे कि ये इस लिस्टिंग के उस पर आप आ रहे हैं और उस पर अब आप एक क्वेश्चन किस्म के अंदाज से चलेंगे। तो वो एक अनदर डिटर्रेंस। आप मिसाल के तौर पे स्टेट बैंक ऑफ पाकिस्तान ने कोलैटरल फ्री लोन्स की एक स्कीम निकाली थी फॉर SME इंडस्ट्री। तो उन्होंने कहा जी आपको अमूमन एक कंस्ट्रेंट होता है कि इनके पास कोलैटरल नहीं होता, राइट। तो उन्होंने कहा जी कोलैटरल के बगैर आप आ जाए, क्योंकि हुकूमत जो है वो गारंटी करेगी बैंक को एक स्टॉप लॉस, up to about 50 or 60% of the first loss will be taken by the government. But the take up on that has not been good. It has not been good, not because the industry, the SMEs would not want to go and potentially borrow at a cheaper rate than the informal credit, जो the money lender type of credit से वो avail कर रहे हैं, but because they are afraid of the taxman. वो कह रहे हैं कि एक बार हम इस टैक्स नेट में आ जाएंगे तो हम तो फिर फंस जाएंगे ना, लाइक मछली फंस जाती है एक नेट के अंदर, तो हम पे हैरेसमेंट होगी। और वो देखते हैं कि जो ऑलरेडी है उस टैक्स नेट में उन पे कितनी हैरेसमेंट हो रही है। सो आवर फिस्कल पॉलिसी इज नॉट कंड्यूसिव टू कंसोलिडेशन, to listing, to higher standards of governance, and higher standards of governance that lead to professionalism. So ये तो एक I think short answer है to your question. Just coming back to branding, I think on a positive note, one of the things that we work very closely with the State Bank of Pakistan, and that has now become possible, is for Pakistani companies to acquire brands abroad and to acquire companies abroad. पहले ये था कि आपको जो एक एक्सपोर्टर को रिटेंशन अलाउंस मिलता है 10% का, वो उसको आप चाहे तो समंदर में फेंक दें, चाहे तो आप उसको प्रोडक्टिवली कोई अपनी मार्केटिंग या सेल्स एक्टिविटी में डालें। लेकिन अगर आप कोई एक्विजिशन करना चाहते थे ब्रांड की या कंपनी की या कोई एसेट खरीदना चाहते थे, वो आप नहीं कर सकते थे। तो स्टेट बैंक ऑफ पाकिस्तान ने कहा कि नहीं, ये नाइंसाफी है, ये हमको करने देना चाहिए। और अब पिछले 3 साल की एवरेज परफॉर्मेंस के ऊपर you are allowed to invest. So for example, they one of the major exporters that I listed amongst the top 10 or top 20, तो उसके अंदर से एक एक्सपोर्टर है, उसकी जो एक्सपोर्ट है वो $400+ million की है। दैट मीन्स $40 million का अलाउंस है फॉर सेल्स एंड डेवलपमेंट। Now he can go and buy a company, and you can buy companies for $40 million. I mean, they may not be very large, but country by country अगर आप करेंगे तो हर साल वो पोटेंशियली वो कर सकते हैं अगर वो कुछ चाहे। But previously you could not do that. आपको पहले स्टेट बैंक की वो $5 million की लिमिट होती है, उसके बाद आपको ECC जाना पड़ता था, और ECC जो 4-5 साल पहले गए हुए केस वापस नहीं आएगी। तो ये कंस्ट्रेंट्स हैं वहाँ पे भी। तो आई थिंक अगर हमको फॉरेन एग्जिस्टिंग ब्रांड को अक्वायर करना है, अब वो मुमकिन हो गया है। अगर आपको लोकल ब्रांड्स को डेवलप करना है तो कम से कम वो 10% तक तो आप वहां से कर सकते हैं। लेकिन स्टेट बैंक ऑफ पाकिस्तान ऑब्वियसली अंडर दीज कंस्ट्रेंट फॉरेक्स रिजर्व पोजीशन में शायद ना वो आप करें, लेकिन आपको ओपन मार्केट से खरीद के करने की इजाजत दे रहे हैं। So once things get back to normality, I hope soon, then at least that will also start. So for example, if you want to establish your own brand abroad, particularly let's say if you're in a consumer product thing, so you've got to register with a supermarket chain. उसकी लिस्टिंग फी होती है, तो फिर उसको अगर आपको एक एडवांटेजियस शेल्फ पोजीशन चाहिए तो उसका वो एक प्रीमियम चार्ज करते हैं। प्लस वो कहते हैं जी अगर ये चीज़ नहीं बिकेगी बाय सर्टेन टाइम और डेट और व्हाटएवर और पेरिश हो जाएगी, आपको वापस लेनी है। तो ये सब चीज़ों के लिए आपको अपनी एक्सपोर्ट पॉलिसीज और रेमिटेंस पॉलिसीज को रिव्यू करने की जरूरत है, और की गई है टू बी फेयर। I mean, they may not be perfect even now, but I think a step has been taken in that right direction, and hopefully can be completed when our forest reserves allow that.
एहसान साहब, बड़ी अच्छी आपने बात की, बिल्कुल ठीक है इजाजत होनी चाहिए फॉरेन इन्वेस्टमेंट की, जो हमारे पास नहीं थी। एंड आई थिंक ये ईसीसी में बार बार कहता था फॉरेन इन्वेस्टमेंट करने दे, वो कहते थे नहीं स्टेट बैंक वाले। आई एम ग्लैड दे हैव चेंज्ड देयर माइंड। पर इसके साथ आपने एक और चीज इलस्ट्रेट कर दी है बड़े अच्छे तरीके से कि वी नीड R&D एवरीवेयर, और यही मैं रोता रहता हूँ। गवर्नमेंट में भी रिसर्च कोई नहीं है, नी जर्क रिएक्शन से पॉलिसी बनती है। तो क्वाइट फ्रैंकली गवर्नमेंट को पता ही नहीं कि ये फिस्कल इम्पैक्ट्स क्या होते हैं, इनकी टैक्स पॉलिसी, टैरिफ पॉलिसी, वेरियस अदर पॉलिसी। इनफैक्ट द टर्म पॉलिसी इज लूजली यूज्ड। वी हैव नो पॉलिसी इन दिस कंट्री, लेट्स बी वेरी क्लियर। वी ओनली हैव नी जर्क रिएक्शंस। पॉलिसी या हम दोनों की पॉलिसी कॉपी कर लेते हैं, अपनी पॉलिसी तो हमारे पास कोई नहीं है। जी महमूद खालिद साहब, फ्लोर से क्वेश्चन। महमूद खालिद साहब।
Nadeem Sahab, I'd just like to add something to Ehsan Malik Sahab. Recently, the Pakistan Stock Exchange increased their listing charges by a factor of 10.
Mashallah.
I mean, instead of facilitating more people to come in, they've created another wall.
सही कह रहे हैं, बिल्कुल सही कह रहे हैं। We love to do that. महमूद खालिद साहब।
सर थैंक यू वेरी मच, इट हैज बीन वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग। मेरा एहसान साहब की गुफ्तगू के बाद ये तासुर डेवलप हो रहा है कि हमारे जो टैक्समैन है वो एक्चुअली प्रॉफिट शेयरिंग मोड में नहीं जाते, वेयर अ बेटर टैक्स पॉलिसी कैन एक्चुअली लीड टू मोर प्रोडक्शन, मोर इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ एंड देयर बाय रिबाउंड एडिशनल रेवेन्यू एज वेल। इस सिलसिले में मेरा उनसे क्वेश्चन है कि अभी एफपीआर ने 2 दिन पहले शायद चाइना FTA 2 को रिवाइज जो HS क्लासिफिकेशन के बाद दोबारा से प्रिंट किया। तो आई जस्ट सॉ कि अबाउट 10,000 लाइंस हैं जो HS क्लासिफिकेशन में, जिसमें वो उन्होंने लिस्टिंग उसकी की है। तो हैविंग सच अ PTA और FTA, क्या ये एक सर्टेनिटी क्रिएट करता है फॉर एटलीस्ट द एक्सटर्नल ट्रेड सेक्टर? और क्या इसी एग्जाम्पल की बेसिस पे कैन देयर बी अ डोमेस्टिक पॉलिसी एज वेल के वेयर एटलीस्ट फॉर 5-10 years देयर इज अ सर्टेनिटी इन टैक्सेशन पॉलिसी?
ओके, सो देखिए, मैंने टू बी ऑनेस्ट ये देखी नहीं है लिस्ट, मैंने सुना है कि कोई लिस्ट निकली है। प्रॉब्लम होता है कि देयर इज अ लैग टाइम बिटवीन द लिस्ट बीइंग यू नो claimed to have been issued to the actual beneficiaries or the people who are affected to getting it. So frankly मैंने नहीं देखी, तो I don't want to make a comment which is not appropriate. However, जहाँ तक इस लिस्ट का की रिलेशनशिप है with the broader free trade agreement, तो ये उसी के अंदर से ही निकाली गई होगी। तो इस वक्त मैंने जिस तरह पहले अर्ज किया था कि 40% or thereabouts of our HS lines can go duty free into China, and perhaps this is an elaboration of that. The other 30% will come by 2030. So I mean, उस वक्त तक we'll probably get 70-75% of the lines going in. जहाँ तक कि tax alignment का ताल्लुक है, तो here we are talking about the export lines, right? We're not talking about the import lines, right? तो उस पे एक्सपोर्ट्स पे तो वैसे भी जो टैक्स होता है वो तो एक फिक्स रेट पे ही होता है ना, 1% ऑफ योर टर्नओवर। तो अगर एक्सपोर्ट बढ़ेगी तो इंशाल्लाह टैक्स रेवेन्यू भी डेफिनेटली बढ़ेगा।
जी, thank you very much. Okay, folks, I think it's time to close. Any last words or questions from the panel? Anybody? Ji, Almas Sahab, Shahid Sahab, anybody?
I have another meeting
No.
on sir, so I need to go. Thank you, sir.
No problem. We are closing. Thank you very much, folks. It's wonderful. All I can say is that we've seen
मैं अगर
very
इजाजत,
clearly.
last comment.
जी जरूर बोलिए।
While we talk of the 18% of the GDP, which is the manufacturing and mining sector, उसमें से अब मैन्युफैक्चरिंग जो है शायद 12 या 13% रह गया है। हमने सारा का सारा बर्डन एक्सपोर्ट का इस 12-13% GDP पे डाला हुआ है। जो हमारी बाकी की जो GDP है, जो जिसमें एग्रीकल्चर आता है, जिसके अंदर सर्विसेज आती हैं, आई थिंक वो इतनी बड़ी पाई है, और वहाँ पे इतनी कैपेसिटी और इतनी पॉसिबिलिटीज हैं कि मतलब दिस 12% और 13% मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर वुड बी ड्वाफ्ड अगेंस्ट इट। हो ये रहा है कि 12% पे टैक्सेशन भी सबसे ज्यादा है, विच इज अबाउट ओवर 60%, और एक्सपोर्ट का बर्डन भी सारा इसके ऊपर है। सो व्हाई यू हैव बीन डूइंग रिसर्च फॉर many years, I would like to know from you कि why are the other sectors exempt from both taxation and from pushing for export, and why all the burden is on manufacturing sector?
वैसे Almas sir, ये बड़ी लंबी debate and we should have it because quite frankly, other sectors are not exempt from taxation. In fact, the service sector pays a heavy regulatory burden, which industry does not pay. Industry gets a huge benefit. जैसे कि अब जब गाड़ियों का जो इतनी प्रोटेक्शन है, तो हम सब मार खा रहे हैं ना गाड़ियों पे, तो गाड़ियों की प्रोटेक्शन तो जा रही है, इंडस्ट्री को जो सर्विस प्रोटेक्शन मिलती है वो बहुत ज्यादा है कंपेयर टू अदर सेक्टर्स. बाकी सेक्टर तो मार खाते हैं. बाकी अगर आप देखें जो सिटी रेगुलेशन है जिसमें मैं बार बार लिखता रहता हूँ, इट टैक्सेस द कंस्ट्रक्शन सेक्टर हेवीली. द प्रॉब्लम इज जी अनफॉर्चुनेटली जब हमें मतलब आई लाइक टू क्लोज कि वी आर अ वेरी कंफ्यूज नेशन. वी आर कंफ्यूज इन एवरी वे. प्लस वी आर अ डॉग ईट डॉग नेशन. हर कोई कहता है तुम टैक्स नहीं दे रहे, तुम टैक्स नहीं दे रहे, तुम ये नहीं कर रहे, तुम वो नहीं कर रहे. एवरीबडी इज आउट आफ्टर ईच अदर. एट द सेम टाइम वी डोंट लाइक R&D, वी डोंट लाइक टू वर्क. हमने एक आर्टिकल लिखा था एक दफा, इंडस्ट्री जो हमारी है वो सेट टू द मशीन है. वी इंपोर्ट मशीन्स एंड वी स्टार्ट. मैं अभी सियालकोट भी गया, गुजरात भी देखा, इंडस्ट्री सारी मशीनें लगा के बैठी हुई कि जी हम मशीन लगा के बैठे हुए, बस ठीक है हम क्रिकेट बैट बना देंगे, फुटबॉल बना देंगे, ये कर देंगे. R&D का मतलब हम सोचते हैं पता नहीं क्या को मैनहट्टन प्रोजेक्ट है या क्या है. बाकी दुनिया में जब आप स्टडी करें, कोई किताब देख लें आप, गूगल वेब, वो साली IBM ज़ीरोक्स में जो रीस्ट्रक्चरिंग हुई थी, पूरी दुनिया की आप देख लें, जनरल इलेक्ट्रिक की देख लें, जैक लिंच वगैरह, देयर इज अ ह्यूज R&D component. R&D is not reinventing the wheel. For example, toothpaste, ये अपना एहसान साहब काम करते थे, टूथपेस्ट हर साल रीइन्वेंट हो जाती है. कैसे? Because they are doing some R&D, branding कर लेते हैं, rebranding कर लेते हैं वगैरह वगैरह. Our industry, we take the lazy way. या crops भी, we are always taking the lazy way. उसमें हुकूमत भी lazy way लेती है because हुकूमत is not really trying to do anything innovative. हमने तो अभी तक फीते वाली फाइल भी नहीं खत्म की, हमने तो अभी तक पटवारी भी नहीं खत्म किया, हमने तो अभी तक कुछ भी नहीं चेंज किया. तो in this lazy culture where nobody is ready to challenge each other and everybody is ready to leg pull, उसमें तो फिर कुछ नहीं हो सकता. तो क्वाइट फ्रैंकली वी हैव टू वेक अप. अब मैं PID में हूँ जब से, मैंने वैसे भी देखा है इंडस्ट्री से अगर हम 1 लाख रुपया भी मांगे ना रिसर्च के लिए, वो नहीं देने को तैयार. नो इंडस्ट्री. मैंने रिसर्च पे किताब की थी about 3 years ago, 4 years ago. मैंने सारी यूनिवर्सिटी में जाकर स्टडी किया. एक इंडस्ट्री एक यूनिवर्सिटी को एंगेज करने को तैयार, पर उसके बरक्स हमारी हुकूमत भी नहीं इंडस्ट्री यूनिवर्सिटी को एंगेज करे. हम 236 यूनिवर्सिटी बना बैठे हैं, 300 बनाने जा रहे हैं, पर हमारी यूनिवर्सिटी सारी फजूल है बिकॉज नोबडी डिमांड्स देयर वर्क. तो फिर क्या करें हम? वी रियली नीड अ रीथिंक, an economic reset, a thought reset. I don't know how it's going to happen. That's way above my pay grade. Thank you very much, folks. Inshallah, we'll keep the dialogue going. All the best. Khuda Hafiz.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Khuda Hafiz.